Hello everyone, this is Agent Ice, and I'm back with another level design deep dive. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite zones in the first Sonic the Hedgehog game, Spring Yard Zone. That being said, if you haven't seen my other deep dive videos, please take a look at those as well. Now, without further delay, let's get ready to deep dive. Spring Yard Zone is the third zone and arguably one of the fastest and most fun to play in the first Sonic the Hedgehog game. It shows up here as well as Sonic Drift as the third racetrack, Sonic Team Racing as an air freshener, the Sonic comics, and the Sonic the Hedgehog movie. Fun fact, it was originally supposed to be called Sparkling Zone and lit up by lots of lights and stars. Probably would look something like the casino levels that we got in later Sonic the Hedgehog games. But now that we know what it was supposed to be and is not, what is Spring Yard Zone? Well, if you look at the Sonic fandom wiki, they say that Spring Yard Zone is supposed to be an amusement park located inside of an urban city. Now, urban city sounds a bit redundant to me, but whatever. If you look at Sonic Retro, it's described as loosely casino-themed areas resembling a pinball machine. I'm not entirely sure I agree with either of these takes from what it represents in the level design. I mean, pinball machines have more than just these round bumpers you see in the zone, and there aren't any flippers. You wouldn't have much of a pinball machine without flippers, and amusement parks have rides and crowds, overpriced chili dogs, screaming children, and long lines. We don't see any of that here. In fact, there's nobody here but us and a bunch of badniks. What we see is a reddish-brown construction with lights, weird signposts, fancy lit up words that make absolutely no sense.
Cope with it.
Some trees or shrubs behind the level itself. Then way in the back, we see what looks like a city with tall buildings and lit up rooms and a purple hazy evening sky. And of course, we see those large purple hazy mountains in the background that we noticed back in Marble Zone. All that being said, your path will determine a lot about your experience here. Taking the correct paths will allow you to move relatively quickly at times and enjoy the thrills of speed briefly and even have some fun platforming moments. But if you take the wrong path, you'll be moving slower or surrounded by danger, perhaps both. One thing that's really awesome about this zone, and one of the more amusing elements, is that we also get springs that'll shoot you high into the air and awesome moments where you get to take advantage of the in-game physics to let loose and have some fun with the half pipes. And all those bumpers that you can use to gain score while you beat the daylights out of Sonic.
Yes. Beat the devil out of it.
There's certainly a little bit of thrill thrown in with the danger, and it makes this zone so, well, amusing. Overall, this is a really fun and awesome zone, and one of my favorites in this game. Not just due to the level design, but the music as well. I love it. Speaking of music, I had some awesome YouTubers give me permission to add their Spring Yard Zone remixes to this video. I'll post their information at the ending credits and down below in the description. Please check them out, they're pretty awesome. Alright, so as always, let's take a look at the story elements. After defeating Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman if you prefer, and his Egg Scorcher at Marble Zone, Sonic chases him to a location known as Spring Yard Zone, where once again, Robotnik gets away. Of course, he didn't really get away, he's just waiting for us with another modification to his Eggmobile. This one flies at you like an angry hornet and is appropriately named the Egg Stinger. After defeating him once again, you break open another animal capsule and rescue the local animals that were collected to be used in his badniks. So now let's look at the difficulty and feel of Spring Yard Zone. Personally, I find this level to be fun with very few truly difficult moments. That doesn't mean you can't just throw caution to the wind if you want to hold on to those rings so you can get those Chaos Emeralds, but if you take the right paths, it's pretty simple. On that note, there are only 6 emeralds in this game, If you've gotten the other bonus rings and successfully collected those emeralds, then you can finish getting them by the end of Spring Yard Zone Act 2. You won't have too many more easy levels, so try to grab those emeralds now if you can. I would rate this zone somewhere between easy and normal, as it isn't much harder than Green Hill Zone in my opinion, but then again, it also depends on the pathing you take. I would maybe give it a 5 out of 10 on the difficulty scale. You may have guessed it, but of course, Spring Yard Zone is also going to come with its own environmental hazards. As you may have guessed, Spring Yard Zone does come with its own hazards. These generally take the form of a spiky ball that either floats horizontally or in a circular pattern around a half pipe. You also have spike sticks that spin around. They're kind of hard to see due to the level covering them until they pop out of the ground. And it doesn't help that these are usually put in very tight areas. Other than that, your only other major hazard is getting squished by moving platforms. And that's pretty easy to avoid for the most part. And then there's one pitfall at the very end of Act 3 that might catch you if you're not careful. Other than that, not really a whole lot as far as the environment goes for danger. But that being said, we do have a few badniks that we need to worry about here. For the third time in a row, the Buzz Bomber shows up because, obviously, you know, they couldn't be bothered to make another enemy type. They're kind of doing their same thing, flying in from one side, shooting at us and flying off, only to return and shoot at us again from the opposite direction. But what makes them suck in this zone is they like to put these near slow-moving platforms, so they're shooting at you while you're trying to advance, and of course kind of stuck waiting for the platforms to move. Usually it's better to take care of these before moving on, because if you don't, they'll start firing at you and you might not be in much of a position to be able to move much. Speaking of returning badniks, although we've only seen this one other time, Crabmeat shows up again, still doing his crab thing by shooting projectiles out of his claws. But they tend to put 2 or 3 of these guys together in this zone, which makes them more difficult. Especially when you consider they're usually waiting for you at the end of a slow-moving platform area, so they're ready to shoot at you by the time you're able to get to them. You want to deal with these quick, but you gotta watch out for those projectiles. Next up, we have Roller. So this is a new badnik, and it's only going to show up in Spring Yard Zone. These guys live up to their name. They come flying in, open up to look around, and then roll at you, sometimes even jumping in an attempt to hit you and make you lose your rings. The only time these guys are vulnerable is when they open up, so you better think quick and strike fast or get out of the way. Last but not least, we have Spikes. These guys are like Motobugs. They just kind of drive around like the Motobugs would, but there is a catch. They have spikes on their back. This means you need to hit them from the top, from the very front, to nail them in the head, or you need to roll into them. Otherwise, you're going to take damage. So now that we finally have all of that out of the way, let's start to take a look at the levels, and we're going to start with Act 1. Act 1 comes out of the gate swinging. Immediately, you have 2 floating rings, 3 crabmeats in a row, and 2 buzz bombers waiting for you, and a steep incline. You have to choose your moves wisely here. Of course, unless you're playing the Origins versions of the game, you won't be able to use Spin Dash to get up that incline, which means you're forced to use the red spring to get up the incline. That being said, if you spin dash, you won't get the height necessary to reach that secret area up to the left that has a 1-up and power shoes monitors. Proceed past the incline and get ready for a wild ride. I suppose this is where people see the pinball aspect of the level. The red spring serves as a launch spring that would shoot the ball into play, and you have all those bumpers to bounce off of. If you don't make it across, it's okay, because there's a red spring down below ready to launch you up this incline as well. I'm also going to share a little tip at the very end of this about this particular section. but we'll get to that later. Go a bit further, and now you face your next challenge. You have 4 buzz bombers that are going to shoot at you repeatedly while you try to get down through the slow-moving platforms area. Unless you're going for a fast time, it's best to take out these buzzy badniks before proceeding. Also, be careful not to get crushed by the blocks, especially in the Origins version of the game. Now, if you thought they threw everything at you already, you better think again. Go down a slope and meet your new friend, the roller. He comes rolling down the slope right at you. If this is the player's first time here, they better hope they are lucky or react just right and quick enough because they may get nailed. Were you in a hurry? Well, if you weren't paying attention and hit that yellow spring trap, it might send you running back into the roller. Amazingly, all of this and you're only 1/4 of the way through the act. Moving along, you'll notice a small platform at a time. You probably don't know what the switch was for, and hit it and kept going. But maybe you hit it and you stayed for a second, only to see the platform fly upward. You missed your chance to find an area with a shield and a ring box, as well as an opportunity for a better route through the act. For now, let's say you kept following Route A. You run into several slow-moving spike balls, and a chain of spike balls that rotate. This dangerous obstacle course is going to make you play with precision, or else you'll be punished by losing your rings. It's not exactly a fun time for a new player, that's for sure. But again, this game generally rewards you for exploration, and you missed your chance. You continue along and find a yellow spring that'll send you up to some slow-moving platforms with a couple of buzz bombers waiting to ambush you. However, if you hit that yellow spring and hang right, you might get into that secret area that has a few rings. Really, there's no reason to go in there unless you really need those rings. Okay, now let's backtrack. Let's say you learned your lesson or you lucked out and hit that switch and jumped onto the platform and rode it up. Congratulations, you win the prize. What is the prize, you ask? You get access to a shield and a ring box, provided you get past 2 rotating spike balls in one piece. And you get to take a crack at Route B. Route B is a lot easier and faster than Route A at this point. If you stay up top on Route B, it's a simple platforming experience complete with random lit up words. If you drop down because you missed a jump, it's okay, because you can hit the yellow spring to go back up. Just watch out for this crab meat badniks. There's also a red trap spring at the bottom, so if you fell down and you didn't deal with those robots, they're gonna deal with you unless you think fast and roll. Continue along Route B, and you can drop down for an invulnerability power-up, or go across the top where Route B and A merge. You also get to surprise attack those buzz bombers. Payback is a glitch. Just make sure you jump on the floating platform, otherwise you may hit that red trap spring and get sent backward. Of course, now is the first time you get to meet Spikes. Remember what I said earlier? Roll into him, or bop him on the very front of the head to take him out. Now you have even more craziness. You have 2 half pipes next to each other, with rotating spike balls. Time it right, and you can jump down and roll through these. Or you can just jump on the floating platforms to get across. Continue on and hit some red springs that send you flying into the air. But be careful, there are 2 crab meat waiting for you at the top. Here, the path branches off yet again. You can continue along Route A by bouncing on more red springs and getting past 2 spikes and some slow-moving platforms. Or you can drop down to take Route C by hitting that switch, which opens the gate that lets you through the wall and bypass the slow-moving platforms and the spikes completely. Keep going and hit that goalpost. If you manage to save 50 rings, you get to take a shot at the Emerald bonus stage. But wait, that's not all. I have a game-winning strat. Remember the very beginning where you first ran into those slow-moving platforms? What if I told you that there's a way you can get over that wall? How, you ask? Remember the wall near the moving platforms? Well, if you hit the red spring and and you fly up and hit and hold A right before hitting each of the 2 buzz bombers. You can fly up high enough to get over top the wall. Awesome, right? So, you made it through 1 act, but can you get past Act 2? You start out pretty high off the ground. You walk forward and soon you're falling down a long ways. At the bottom of a cliff there's a half pipe. If you get enough speed, you can fly up and take Route B. If you didn't get your speed up, you'll be taking Route A instead. Route A sucks. You have more big spike balls, spike ball chains, and slow moving platforms at the end. It just isn't worth taking. Or is it? You may not have noticed, but the rings telling you to go straight up lied to you. Turns out, you could have pushed through the wall on the right, and just above the red spring, there's an access to a secret route. You need to not get squished, but if you make it through, you'll end up with 24 rings and a 1-up power-up. Not too shabby and a decent reward. Take the red spring up and you'll get a shield power-up as well as more rings. The only real downside of this hidden route is the fact that you can get stuck on those springs and bumpers. Of course, if you miss this hidden area, you'll have to deal with 3 spikes up at the top. You can then drop down and take a red spring up, or you can hit a red spring hidden in the wall to pick up a few rings. Personally, I don't think taking that path is worth it, but you do you. Now, if you end up taking Route B, you immediately need to deal with 2 crab meat and avoid a red trap spring. The goal is to get your speed up and jump at the right point so you can land on the floating platform. Once you're up there, you have 2 spikes to worry about and 2 half pipes with 2 rotating spike balls each. You might be better off using those floating platforms here. Once you get past that, you have 2 crab meats guarding a red spring with 2 more crab meats waiting at the top. Both paths are kind of rough at this point, but you didn't think the game was going to get easier, did you? Take the red spring up and go left to get the invulnerability power up. That'll make dealing with the upcoming crab meat and spikes far easier. At this point, Route B merges with Route A. Get past the bumpers and the buzz bombers and the trap spring, and now you have another round of floating spike balls to avoid. Also, you get to make a choice here. You can try to avoid the floating spike balls that guard the red spring, or you can continue along Route A, and Route A will make you deal with 2 rollers and a half pipe with a rotating spike ball. Now, if you took the red spring up to get to Route C, you can ignore the crab meat on the left and just head to the right and jump across the platforms with no worries. Eventually both paths merge right before another cliff. At this point, if you get enough speed and you jump up at the right time, you can make it up to Route D, where you'll find several rings and a goal post and maybe even a bonus ring stage if you got through with at least 50 rings. Otherwise, you're going to keep going along Route A and find another goal post. That's right, folks. There are 2 goal posts right here. Bet most of you didn't know that, unless maybe you were playing around in debug mode. Don't get too cocky, because now you have one last act and a boss to get past. you out on a slope that leads to a cliff with a shield power-up and red springs at the bottom. You need to land just right to be able to get that shield though. Once you get up on top, you can get a rig monitor. Now you can also try to get up on top and grab invulnerability stars from a hidden area up above, which might just come in handy because you need to make it through another gauntlet. Get through the gauntlet and you have two choices. You can drop down and get a few rings from a secret area, which isn't really worth it, or you can continue straight up past several slow-moving platforms. Just watch out for the two crab meat at the top. Now, if you took Route B, you can skip all of this and do a few platforming moments to skip the craziness. Eventually, you get to the biggest cliff in the game, where you drop down. Here you have two things you can do. You can use the inertia to get up and find two item boxes in the wall on the right, which you can actually see in the demo for Springyard Zone if you let the game idle at the main menu a few times. You're definitely going to want those power-ups though, because you have another gauntlet to get through. After you get your items, drop down to Route A. You're forced to hit a switch which makes a block move. You can either go past the block and continue forward along Route A, or take the red spring up to Route C. If you're too slow, the block will block off Route A and force you to take C. Continuing along A gets you two ring boxes and a shield. You just need to get past a rotating spike ball stick. If you took Route C, you have more half pipes with spike balls and a couple of crab meats waiting for you, and then some slow-moving platforms. Punishment is real for taking the wrong paths. As usual, both paths merge, and you're on to the last leg of the act. Hit the red spring and fly up. Control Sonic well. You can even bounce off of a bumper to get to a floating platform, which leads to another and another, eventually getting to an area with two hidden power-ups, a shield and a one-up. If you drop down, you can get an invulnerability star power-up as well. They're not going to be too helpful, but if you book it across the gap, you can get a few seconds for your fight against Robotnik. Just watch your step. Make it across the gap, and the slow-moving platforms, and the egg hornet shows up. It'll try to stab you with its large spike that's affixed to the bottom of the eggmobile. Just sidestep and nail them. No pun intended. Time it right, you can get up to 3 hits on them. Just don't accidentally fall through the floor, or you'll die. Beat Eggman and break open that capsule and head to Labyrinth Zone. But that might be a video for another day. But that depends on you. If you want to see more, let me know. Otherwise, you may move on and do something else.